nutrition, socialization, physical health, and self-care activities. The self-assessments are to guide you to seek timely help and a proper psychological evaluation by an expert, which can in turn help you in identification of the current problems and symptoms. Employers can support their employees with Samvedna employee mental well-being services. Samvedna MAP works for enterprises, CEOs, and HR can use MAP to institutionalize a mental well-being program for their employees, as well as track employee wellness metrics, such as how their employees feel about their mood, sleep, and emotional well-being. Organization-wide assessments helps with rolling out specific one-to-one wellness coaching sessions, workshops, and support groups. Samvedna also offers individual counseling, therapy, and chat services to help employees with their concerns. Mental well-being programs return 4 to 5 times of the investments for organizations. They have shown 40% improvement in absenteeism, improvement in productivity, and lower cost of health insurance claims. A better future for your organization is just a click away. Visit us at map.samvednacare.com to know more about our services. Head over to Samvedna Care and utilize the MAP tool to curate the MAP for a better mental well-being today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, great. So just give me 1 second. We thought we will just play the video while we are waiting for some more participants to join. And now I'm going to make you co-host so that you can enter people in. So let me get started because I know we have a very long agenda for the day, and I'd like to cover a lot of things which we have planned out today. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Archana Sharma, and I'm the founder of Samvedna Care. Welcome to this very special webinar on self-care and nurturing strategies of self-care in your teams. Samvedna Care is a 10-year-old organization, and we have been working with individuals and organizations in the area of mental health across various age groups. We firmly believe in early detection and diagnosis of mental health issues and promoting proactive measures to ensure your well-being. That has been the core philosophy of all the services and products Samvedna has to offer. Every 24th July is marked as International Self-Care Day. This topic of self-care has typically been associated with something you do outside of your work hours, you do it on a vacation, or you do it on a holiday. However, I don't know if you know, but Google Trends says that the search volume of self-care has quadrupled since 2018. And we need to change this context to adapt self-care as a way of living, to live more holistic lifestyles and interweave it in our daily routine. As business leaders and HR, we need to invest time in ensuring that our own self-care is taken care of, and we are able to carry along our team and inculcate in them self-care practices as a way of living, to create happier and more productive work environments and happier teams. So let us get right into this conversation. I'd like to introduce and welcome Ashok Kapoor. He's Vice President Marketing at Newgen Software. Ashok is a business leader with more than 30 years of experience in various roles. He takes keen interest in developing his teams. He has a great people connect and has always been a hands-on leader. He's a coach, trainer, and a systems thinking practitioner using Peter Senge, the fifth discipline. Welcome, Ashok. We are all looking forward to hearing your thoughts and practical tips.
I look forward to being here.
Thank you. And my second panelist is my co-founder, Dr. Jayashree Dasgupta. She's a clinical psychologist and alumni of NIMHANS Bangalore. And Jayashree is also currently pursuing a Global Atlantic Fellowship in Brain Health at Trinity College, Ireland. So Jayashree, good to have you here as an expert. So we will try to interweave the practical and the scientific part of this discussion. So, so let's get started. Let's jump into this session. We have quite a few things. So we have a couple of poll questions also. And for the audience, I would like to just mention that this is being recorded. And we would like to, in case you would like to if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hands, and we'll definitely like to hear your views and see how and try to answer your questions as well. So at the onset, I would like to request both Ashok and Jayashree to share your views on self-care, and what do you understand by self-care, and what is your take on it? So over to you, Ashok.
Okay. Thanks, Archana. Good to be here. As a quick background, I work for Newgen Software, and we are in the whole digital transformation and end-to-end automation space. So, I mean, it's fairly clear I've been in the software line. I'm currently heading marketing. But I've been in software for over 30 years now, and it's all about working with teams. Whether it's a specialized team or it's a distributed team or a hybrid team. Basically, it's working with teams, and you're as good as your team is. We all know that, and I think this whole concept of making your whole team productive, in the software world, you have a lot of training. So there's training of all these technologies, things are changing all the time, internet, mobile, and all of that. But I think one aspect that does get ignored, and something that I would have learned the hard way, or my team would have learned the hard way over the years by trial and error, is this whole concept of self-care, mental well-being, all of that. And we've actually learned it the hard way, and happy to share some of those experiences. But it would have been wonderful if in the early years we had something like Samvedna or somebody to guide us in this whole space and say what's doable, what's doable. So my view is that it is important, and we've learned it the hard way, and looking forward to Archana, to your questions and further discussion on this. Jayashree, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Ashok. No, it's really great to be joining you all from Dublin. It's always a pleasure. And I think just in terms of what self-care means, I just thought I'd kind of highlight that a bit from a psychological perspective. I mean, I'm just going to read out the official definition of this by WHO, so that we're just all at the same page when we begin with this. And it's defined as the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a health worker. And that's a really, you can see from that definition, it's really broad. And I think through the course of the discussion, we'll get into what this means for us as individuals and as teams, more importantly. But one thing that I just wanted to highlight is that that we're all social beings, and whether you look at this from a perspective of an organization or you look at it as an individual, and the context within your own family situation, we're all at the end of the day working within some sort of a team. So I think there's something that everybody can draw from this discussion today, whether you're an HR manager or an individual who's listening in, or you're working with teams, or you're a part of a team, or you're leading a team. So I'll just stop with that.
Okay. So before we get into the conversation further, I would like to launch a poll question. This is just to get some idea about how people are looking at their self-care. So can everybody see the poll question? So the question is really, how often do you practice self-care? And daily, several times a week, or never? So, and if somebody else has anything else to share, then please type it in the chat window. So, because there could be more answers. Okay, so looks like 67% of them. Can you see the results, Jayashree?
Not yet. No.
Okay, I'll just end it. Yeah. So now you can see. Yeah. So looks like 67% of the people practice self-care several times a week. So that's great. And 25% have never attempted self-care. And some of them, there's a very small population, I think only one, which is one respondent, which is saying that almost every day. Wonderful. So Jayashree, with that, I would like to request you to please explain what self-care means beyond that, the WHO definition. And why is there so much talk about it now? Why has, this is self-care month, everything I open, I feel like, forget about in LinkedIn, or I see banners of real estate companies who are promoting well-being and self-care. So, it suddenly become the talk of the town. So I would like to hear your insights.
Yeah, thanks, Archana. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. We're hearing a lot more about self-care. Now, of course, this is self-care month, and there is a push to highlight the importance of self-care. But I think one of the things is that there's been an increase in awareness about how important it is to focus on ourselves and our well-being as individuals, and probably that might be an outcome of several things that have happened in the last couple of years. Of course, the COVID pandemic was a huge push towards highlighting the challenges that people face with their mental well-being, as well as their physical well-being. And again, self-care involves both of these two key aspects. I think there is no one who hasn't been impacted in some way or the other by the COVID pandemic globally. And I think in a lot of ways, that was a huge leveler. It was a huge, it provided a sort of impetus to really bring this whole conversation into the living room and out in the open about how important it is to look at these things and how key they are to our overall well-being as individuals. So I think the COVID pandemic definitely plays a huge role in highlighting that. Almost about 60 to 70 million people within India have diagnosable mental health related issues. However, only a very small fraction of these people receive support. And one of the challenges, and we talk about this all the time at Samvedna, is because there aren't enough resources to provide help. And self-care is a critical aspect for maintaining your well-being, to keep you kind of supported. Of course, there's always professionals that you can turn towards, but self-care is really focusing on how you can help yourself to maintain your well-being and allow yourself to grow, develop, feel supported in society, function at your optimal level. And that's really what self-care is all about. I don't know, there are a couple of things that I could talk about in terms of different dimensions and aspects of self-care that's maybe familiar to some of you, but I don't know whether you'd like to jump in, Ashok, with your thoughts on this.
So it's, you very rightly spoke about a lot of this getting highlighted during COVID. I think one of the boundaries that COVID, kind of erased was this whole home and work boundary. There was some kind of a boundary at some, there's always been some kind of a boundary. Okay. And I think that got erased. So even post-COVID, okay, we're seeing that maybe in a good way, a lot of people's work and home life is very tightly integrated. You have far more people saying, oh, I have to, very openly. Maybe in other countries it was accepted, but in India to say, oh, my wife's going to work today, so I have to stay home today and look after the kid. Okay. Or I have to drop him to school, so I need to go off at 2 and come back at 2. Okay. So with that blurring, I would say both men and women are taking on much more of an integrated, look at things. And whether we like it or not, it's added to the, whether you call it stress or responsibility or load that each person is handling and dealing with. And, we were used to saying that, oh, the person's at work, you've got to be productive, and you got to work hard and you got to reach your goals. But I think you're forced to look at people as complete people. Okay, there is a full dimension to them. You can't just, expect someone to come to office and switch off everything and only focus on work, and then go home and switch off everything and deal with that. So I think you're forced to look at people as, like you said, as as holistic. Look at the person from all aspects. And I think the second thing is really this whole information overload. We get so much information from so many sources, even when you're at work. Okay, so whether it's emails, whether it's your internet, whether it's your WhatsApp, whether you're reading about a crisis somewhere, war here, war there. So how do you just de-link from all of that? So to me, self-care for myself, for people that I work with, it's about being able to switch off for a bit, in a good, healthy way. And, whether it's getting out of work every day and doing some sports, or thinking about hobby, or doing some kind of meditation, or something like that. I think that's what to get away from all of it in a way. So while you're doing much more, you need to focus and get away from it, and cultivate some of these things consciously. So you have a hobby, have a sport, do some mental exercises, do breathing exercises. I think it's critical to do.
No, great. So Ashok, you can you share a little bit more about what specific personal care, like personal self-care practices you follow? Because I know that I've seen you over a period of time, and I've seen that I know you're engaged in a lot of things. So would you like to share some of the self-care which you practice? And also, how have you encouraged your teams to practice self-care? What are the tips? Because there are many of us here who probably are struggling in this area, and first individually, and then not able to inculcate it in their teams. So, what has been your mantra or best practice?
Okay, so I think, as a manager, there is a certain degree, or as someone who has a team. And so I used to be this guy who would get upset very, very quickly. Some work is not happened, I get really, really upset. So you have this manager who gets, upset very quickly at the smallest thing. Now, how am I going to manage the mental well-being of my team? Okay, so through chance or whatever, I came across some programs that helped me deal with all of this. So where I was able to get insight and say, oh my God, I get stressed at this. So my whole self-awareness, I get stressed at a bunch of things. Okay, kind of pointed me in a direction. There was somebody like Archana or Jayashree at the other end who told me, this is what you guys need to do. Take out some time, do some meditation. So I spent a lot of time doing 20 minutes of meditation, something small, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, once a week. That's where it started. But over the years, it's not something that you do for 3 weeks and it's over. But over the years, the impact has been profound. Okay, where a lot of those upsets, issues, small thing, etc., have, kind of just dissolved and gone away. Some of it also comes with perspective. So, when I look at my team, I'm forced to look at people as, they're all bringing some kind of load and baggage to work. Okay, so I can't go around telling people, do some meditation, do something else like that. That everybody has their own way of what they want to do. It's like everybody knows it's great to exercise, but do they go and exercise every week? Okay. So what do I do at work? So I think one is to really acknowledge that when people are coming in, whether it's a Monday morning or whether it's your daily meeting that you get together with your team, and simply asking a question like, what are you dealing with today? Okay, and in fact, there's a simple technique that somebody taught me to say, just ask this question, what are you dealing with today? And somebody says, my car had a flat tire and I had to go out in the evening later today. Somebody says, I had a really rough weekend, my kid was sick. And somebody says something else. So it's a 2, 3, 4, 5 minute conversation that you can bring into, asking your people, asking your team, and it brings everything on the table. You're not able to resolve it, but it acknowledges the person that he's carrying so much more. And then when he gets down and sits and work, you've kind of helped him keep that in mind. If there's something urgent, he can go off and do it, and he can focus on his work. He's communicated it or something. So I think that communication brings me to the second point, which is you need good relationships. Even if you're at work, you need a trusting relationship. So how do I as a manager have an open environment? How people trust each other, versus if you're distrustful of the people around you, you're always questioning their motive, is someone stealing someone's credit? Okay. What mental well-being am I going to be able to foster in the team? So one is some simple techniques and some way of building an open and trusting environment with the team. Again, you learn things the hard way because I don't have a rule for that. You just learn things and some techniques you picked up along the way. But I think these two things I've seen at workplace that have helped.
So one is really acknowledging and communication. Yeah, I think how many of us ask people what are they dealing with on a daily basis? I don't think we do that very often. We're so occupied with our own thoughts, and that I need to get to work and get this started or get this done. So yeah, Jayashree, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ashok, you hit on a number of really important things. It's great to see that you're doing this with your teams and your organization, because I think these are really fantastic best practices to follow. In fact, there's actually a lot of research that's looked at how can you foster and develop a sense of self-care in organizations and teams. And all of them talk about how important it is to create this sort of like a safe space, talk about, emotions, the challenges that you face before or when you're coming into work. We're not robots that switch off when we reach work. As ideal as that would be, I don't know whether that would, if that's in an ideal world, would that increase our efficiency? I have no idea, but practically it's impossible. We're relational beings. We come in with that baggage that you were referring to. We often carry that through our work process. And it's really important for managers to see how we can facilitate an environment where people feel comfortable to, to kind of keep that baggage aside for a while, work, understand that it's okay to be vulnerable in the workspace at times, and have the support of your team, when you feel you can't let go of that baggage. And I think that's really an important role that a manager plays, because you're creating that safe space and that environment and that facilitation. And in fact, there's a lot of group relations theory and social psychology principles which talk about the importance of creating this self space. And I just want to highlight one thing, that when we talk of self-care, often people interpret this as being something that's your individual responsibility to take on. It's your responsibility to take care of yourself. And that's not practical. We all have to learn to take care of each other. And I think that's the important thing to think about when we're talking about how do we foster self-care in teams. If there's one member who's facing some sort of adversity, some sort of issue, it could be a breakdown before they, their car before they come into work. I mean, we've all had those experiences. We've recently had, terrible rains. I'm sure that was not fun for anyone when we were going to work. That was probably one of the times during the pandemic when we were thankful that we didn't have to, reach work through those, through the monsoon season. It's something we all deal with. But how often do we actually discuss that and think and ask, what is the impact of that on your ability to do your work? And there's, we refer to this as relational pauses. And that's really that safe space, that zone where we're opening up this, the fact that all of us experience some sort of some sort of adversity or other at various points, could be during the day, during the week, or whatever. And we're opening up that space in the work environment to say it's okay, to have that, and we can still continue to work together. And just acknowledging that is really, really important as a manager, because you're creating that environment to say, it's fine to come in with that baggage. I'm allowing you to put it aside. This isn't a whining session. Yes, we all crib and whine at some time, but it's really about saying, I acknowledge that you come in with these challenges, and I'm here to help you work better, acknowledging that these challenges are going to be there. And I might not be able to change those things for you, but I'm acknowledging that. And that really shifts the balance in terms of the way teams function.
Yeah, and I think the difficulty or the challenge that organizations face, it's great. You may have, 1, 2, 3, 4 managers who are self-aware, but how to set it up as a culture or some kind of a training so that, at least managers they'll all follow it to a different degree, but they're at least aware of it, how it helps them, how it helps their team. So I think that's where the challenge is, that they accept I think there's much greater acceptance, and at least at Newgen IHR is fairly forward thinking. We have these culture tenet workshops, things like that. But that's where I think the real challenge and the real hard work needs to be put in.
Great. So while we're on challenges, I think let's ask the audience, what are their challenges? And I know that I'm just going to launch a poll question. Okay, why am I logged out? I'm not able to. Can you log in? Can you launch a poll question? Just 1 second. Launch 3. Third question. No? Okay. So there is some glitch. I don't know what is being, but I think what we can do is we can ask people to type in the chat window. So the question is really about, what are the challenges you experience while practicing self-care? And scientifically, or, the literature says there are 3 areas. One is about lack of time. The other is about guilt or feeling selfish if you are indulging in self-care. And the third is you don't feel the need for self-care. So would audience like to share, or, would you like to type? Okay, so we have lack of time. The other options are feeling unproductive or feeling selfish to get into self-care. Okay. Yeah, this is the third poll question. Got it? Okay, we have the question. So I think Navya can launch it. And the third is that you don't feel the need for it. So how many of us here don't feel the need for self-care?
Yeah, and Archana, the poll has come up as well.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay. So almost everybody says lack of time. This is the typical manager and subordinate conversation. So Jayashree, would you like to come in and explain this and also talk a little bit more about the dimensions of self-care and, give certain tips as well?
Sure, I think it's really interesting that everyone who's listening in today has identified kind of lack of time as the challenge for self-care. I have to say I experienced that myself as well, and that's the time when when I feel that I have a lack of time to practice self-care, that's the warning bell, because as Ashok you were mentioning earlier, it's really about becoming more consciously aware of how important this is, and really, in a way, carving out that time to do this more for yourself. And I think that's really important, because it's particularly for managers, because you have to kind of, there's also a lot of pressure to lead by example, and it's not easy. I have to acknowledge that it's really, really difficult. Our day has 24 hours, and if we actually look at what we do in that 24 hours, I think you'd be surprised at how we use that time. And I think that's the first step in terms of just learning to find time for self-care. And one of the things that I often do with a lot of people that I work with is really ask them to just sit down and look at what they're doing. And it's often surprising about the amount of time that we spend maybe with social media, with answering emails, thinking about the thing that you need to do, but actually not getting down to doing it. So there's a lot of this time spent procrastinating, or the various things that might be occupying your day. The first thing I think is it's really important to become aware of what you're doing through the day. There's nothing wrong with sleeping. There's nothing wrong with watching TV. There's nothing wrong with reading a book. We had feeling unproductive when you're engaging in self-care. A lot of the times when we feel we don't have the time for self-care, we're actually we're depriving ourselves of engaging in activities that could be better for us in the long run, help us become more efficient in the long run. So I think the first thing to really do is ask ourselves, what are we doing in that 24 hours, and be very honest with ourselves. Sometimes it's difficult to be honest with ourselves about how we're utilizing our time. So that's one thing that I would encourage people to sit down and really do as an exercise for themselves. And I think we already kind of touched upon, the way that everybody has different things that work for them, that make them feel more productive, better. That's the other, there's different ways in which you feel that you might be practicing self-care. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same for everyone. So maybe I'll just stop with that.
So Jayashree, actually, I would like you to comment a little bit about, I was reading something prior to coming to this thing, but guilt many people feel guilty about self-care. Would you like to, share something on where that is coming from, or
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think often when we talk of self-care, people associate this with being selfish, taking time out for me. And that's, I mean, again, I started with talking about the definition of self-care. It's really about understanding your agency in taking, being able to manage your needs better, and taking care of your well-being. This is very different from being selfish. But I think when we talk of self-care, a lot of times people tend to think of this as being selfish. I'm taking time out for myself. I'm not devoting time to my work, my family, whatever else that I'm doing. We see this a lot of times with caregivers as well. And it's not, it's very different. When you take out from time for yourself, that you're actually giving yourself that well-needed pause to recover from whatever it is that you've experienced. And it's actually going to benefit you more in the long run. It's not being selfish, and that guilt really comes from that understand, kind of viewing this more as, or questioning yourself, am I being selfish if I take time out for myself? And it's really about understanding that when you do take time out for yourself, when you do give yourself that pause, it's very important. And that's why one of the important aspects of physical self-care is sleep. And I can't emphasize how important this is, because sleep is, biologically, it serves a very, very important purpose. It has a restorative function. It's critical. And when we say we don't have time, that often leads into, I'm not sleeping well, I'm not sleeping enough. And that's one of the first things to start with. You do need, on an average, 6 to 8 hours of good quality sleep. And it's a starting point. Just because if you're sleeping in one day, or that's not being selfish. I mean, just as a very crude kind of example. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally agree. So I like to shift this conversation a little bit, to Ashok. I want to ask you that, why do managers hesitate to promote self-care? I think, this is not, I mean to say, not just about self-care, but when there are any other activities which are not non-task related or work related, there's typically a hesitation, So whether it's, it could be anything, but self-care then actually comes last in that list of the things people like to resist, when managers promote it. So
Yeah, I think you're right. In our organization as well, there'll often be just pure fun time. It's a day before Diwali, it's a day before Rakhi, it's a day before Holi, and you take out time and you have something with the team, and the managers do resist it. That's kind of a waste of time. So I think one is, it's very important that forward-looking HR actually sets up all of these things and makes it happen, irrespective of whatever resistance they face. And you'll find that if someone has to pull a manager into the fun, and then they really enjoy themselves, and there's a different level of bonding that actually happens with the team. But you're right, there is resistance. Okay, it's almost as though, hey, this is interfering in my work and it's not related to work, and this whole thing is a surprise. I think there are a couple of other aspects to it, which is, when we talk about this whole thing of acknowledging a person and understanding them, there's this whole concern of, oh, will I get too close to people, that I won't be able to ask them to work hard. Oh, and after that, will someone take advantage of me? So all of this is also playing at the back of the mind, which says, and different people deal with it differently, is what's the appropriate amount of promoting self-care I should do? Okay. And, without someone taking advantage of me, or I'm too soft to manage. Oh my God, what will people think of me? Okay. But, and this whole busy schedule thing, we all have it. We all been there. In fact, I saw one of the messages just now. I think Sanjeev or somebody on the message board has said that we're managers, we have to come in early, we have to go back late. Okay. And, setting examples, where do we get the time? Okay. And we've had that discussion at work with, HR and a few of us. I think what we realized is whatever we think is important, we always take out time for. All of a sudden, someone falls sick for 5 days, gets viral fever, the work adjusts itself. If all of a sudden someone has a crisis, needs to take a week off, the work adjusts itself. Okay. Your senior manager comes in. Now this whole new customer, surprise coming in from the US, 10 days from now, everybody rolls up their sleeves and works only on that. What happened? What happened to your schedule? What happened to the calendar? Okay, so I was, in my whole self-care journey, I was forced into it at some point, where I just had to do it. I didn't have a choice. But I found that after doing it rigorously for 6 months, 1 year, all of a sudden I was so much more productive at work. So it paid for itself many times over. Okay, so I used to take an hour and a half in meetings, struggling with agreeing with everybody's decisions and no decisions getting taken. Okay, to reaching a point where I would go into a meeting with my notes on what decisions I need taken and just finishing it in 30 minutes and getting out of it. Okay, so enough time for self-care, I found for me. Everybody works differently. I'm not prescribing for anyone. I worked magically, okay, where I was able to get tremendous amount of more work done in office, and just found new solutions, new creative ideas, because you're that much more relaxed, you're not under stress with so many things happening. It just worked wonders. So Archana, I don't know if it answered your question, but this is what I found has worked, some of my experiences.
Right. Yeah, and so actually my next question is, Jayashree, really to you, navigating the pitfalls of promoting self-care. What are I think the connotation of self-care a lot of times is I'm going to take a spa day, or, I'm going to get my hair done or something like that, But then there is this, I just came across this term, bed rotting. It was a very interesting term, which was, and it's like you're spending the whole day in bed, and people, that's a terminology I think is used by, the younger generation, that I'm bed rotting and it means I'm relaxing. So, is that a good thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think how you practice. So maybe before I get to that, I could just highlight like some of the different aspects or dimensions of self-care, because I don't think we've spoken about that. And that might be something that's important to just highlight. So when we talk of self-care, there are different aspects. One is, of course, your emotional self-care. And that's really about having satisfying and fulfilling relationships. And this could be your personal relationships as well as your work relationships, or in general relationships with other people. Then the other aspect is about your physical self-care, and this really involves things that I was mentioning earlier about your sleep. We've been talking about things like exercise, importance of adequate nutrition. These are all things that contribute to our physical self-care, and the decisions that we take around these aspects to ensure our physical well-being. The third aspect is really about, the social self-care that we have. And again, this is about the sense of belonging that we feel. We all feel good when we feel like we belong somewhere. And that's a really important thing to foster when we talk about teams. And the fourth aspect is something that I think, Ashok, you were mentioning a lot about, is a spiritual aspect of self-care. Meditative practices and all of these things are really good for supporting these aspects. But broadly, what we mean by spiritual self-care is really about having that larger sense of purpose, meaning, and seeing that sense of meaning in whatever we're doing. Very important, again, when we're talking about the work-related context. And then the intellectual aspect of self-care. We're all relational, social, intellectual beings. We're working, which means that our workspace should be providing us some sort of stimulation that we find interesting and important. And I think these are all things that, it's just recognizing those abilities and the, skills that each individual team member brings into the workspace is really important to foster that sense of self-care and well-being. But coming back to what you were asking, Archana, about, this term is really interesting about bed rotting. And I think, yes, it definitely works for some people. It might not work for others. Personally, I don't know whether I'd like to rot in bed all day, or whether I would, enjoy going out and, doing something that might be more meaningful for me. Again, there isn't any one quote unquote right way of doing self-care. It's about what works for you. It could be the same, could be the different things work for you at different times. But what's really important, I think, is, and again, drawing from the fact that we feel like we don't have enough time in our days to practice self-care, is really about the importance of learning to unplug. So a lot of people, I was looking in the chat, have spoken about how important it is to stick to work timings. It's really important to kind of understand when to switch off from work. And I think that's really, really important. And that sort of effective time management, fostering that within organizations, is really, really critical as well.
Right. So I think there's a comment here. Prabhas is sharing that another big culprit is after office drink and de-stress sessions. Learning to say no to them at least half the time, or learning to call it a day at a predetermined exit time, is key to sanity. I believe that's very well said, Prabhas. I don't know if you'd like to come in, but yeah, I think a lot of managers, it seems to be the tendency that I'm going to take out my team on a Friday evening for a drink and all things will get sorted. How many of them will take their teams to a yoga class or a meditation class or something which is more fulfilling, or so.
Yeah, so
We should have done a poll on that, Archana, to see what people think would be a good way to do self-care.
Yeah. Prabhas, would you like to come in? Yeah.
If I may come in, Archana, I'm not even judging, because I worked in alcohol for 7 years, right? I was in Samvedna. So I'm not even judging the benefit of one against the other. All I'm saying is the way people think that infinite time is available and they have access to that infinite time. You will have a child or a dog or a wife or a husband waiting at home, right? And it is not really de-stressing or self-care to indulge in 6 p.m. to 12 midnight parties and think that this is going to be de-stressing the team, either for myself or for my team. The ability to kind of have a boundary there. The boundary could mean, no, I'm going home and I don't need to be participating in this. That would be one boundary. And the other boundary could be, I'm coming in, but I will leave at 8 o'clock, whether you like it or not. Right? So these two boundaries are very important. I'm not judging whether yoga is better than alcohol. Every man for himself, whatever works for them. But the ability to say no, I think that's what I'm focusing on here.
And I think I'd just like to add to that, it's really important, again, as a manager, to facilitate that sort of an environment where it's okay if your team says no for this. Sometimes, there is also that sort of a dynamic sometimes that operates where people feel compelled to say yes. And so it works both ways. I think it's important to develop that sort of environment, to feel that sort of pulse from the team. Also, I think you were mentioning earlier about around, holidays and, these, festivals. We can't ignore that these things are a part of our lives. If you expect people to put in, to switch off when they come to work just before Diwali, it's highly unrealistic. I think we have to accept that people are going to have half their mind focused on what they need to do next, the things that they've been dealing with when they come home. Factor in as a manager the fact that productivity is going to be lower at this time. Again, you were mentioning forward-thinking managers, Ashok, and I think that these are things that people need to become aware of and trained on. We don't talk about this enough.
So since we are talking about self-care, I just wanted to make one, but I believe that in adult to adult transactions, it's also important for people to stop behaving like kids and become adults in their own journey with their managers, right? You should learn to say no, and unless it's part of your KRAs, it's perfectly all right to say no, right? And say that, look, I don't enjoy it, I'm not going to be doing it. If you don't do it at the beginning, and I tell this to my young team members here who are 22, 23 years old, 24 years, that if you don't learn to say no at the beginning of your career, by the time you're 40, you'll get used to it. So you need to learn, and if the job doesn't work out because of that, so be it. Then you are in the wrong place to begin with. So you need to be mindful of that. It's your own journey, not just a journey of your manager and their role to do it for you. It's your own journey as well.
Right. Yeah. No, thank you, Prabhas, for coming in. I know you are in HR and you specialize in this area in a lot of ways. So thank you for sharing your views. And I'd like to, we are kind of running out of time, but I'd like to do a quick poll. Can we do the second poll and get people to just share? And Ashok, if you could have your video on, that will be great. So.
Okay, it should be on now.
Okay, great. And we've just launched a third poll question. So everybody can just respond to that as to how do you prioritize self-care while managing stress and work pressures. So we've also been running a lot of poll on LinkedIn of late, to help us understand how people are managing and coping with their mental health and wellness. So great. So would anybody like to share what are the other activities they get indulged in with self-care? I'd like to really, people can type it in the chat window. That would be nice. So it seems like people like to do a lot of walks and workouts. That's my personal way to de-stress and engage in hobbies and activities. And anybody wants to share what are the other activities they indulge in terms of self-care? Anybody wants to type? Explore new places, travel, absolutely. That's a great de-stressor. Reading, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Shivani. Great. So we are almost coming to an end of the session. So Jayashree, would you like to summarize this for, in terms of key takeaways for the teams? And I'll also ask Ashok to come in, but what is it that you would want to leave the audience with here today?
Sure. I think in just terms of key takeaways, I really like to highlight the importance of switching off and from work and taking out time for self-care. And I think that related with that is really the importance of creating effective boundaries. What we were talking about earlier in terms of saying no when something doesn't work for you, understanding for yourself what works best for you. So really getting that sort of self-awareness and nurturing that early on in our careers. I think I completely agree with you that that's very, very essential. And I think as managers of younger teams, that's also a really important aspect to nurture in younger team members. And the other aspect is really about effective time management and the importance of open communication and nurturing a space and environment where that's allowed and you encourage that. I think, Ashok, you were mentioning something about, concerns around, how do you do that? And would you be seen as a, soft manager? And I think I think that's maybe another entire discussion, but yes, it's not a very easy thing to do, but open communication is definitely important.
Yep.
Ashok, so
In fact,
I would also like you to give a couple of tips for there are team leaders and managers, young managers here in this who are listening in as to how they can help their teams,
Okay. Couple of points. One, try and fix a time frame. Whether for yourself or for your team, put it in the calendar. So if there's a structure, invariably it happens. And if there's a structure in which there is somebody else along with you, so you and two other team members are going to go for a 20-minute after lunch walk. It will happen because there are two people waiting for you. Okay. If you are going on Saturday mornings for cycling and there are three more people with you, it will happen. Because there are three people, they'll be waiting. So there is a power in putting a structure and a calendar to make things happen, even if it's for yourself. Okay, because otherwise it's the last thing. It's like any meeting where 6 people are going to turn up, invariably you'll turn up for them. Okay, even if you think it's a waste of time, you'll be there. So, but try to. So one tip is simple: just try to build a structure. Second tip that has worked for me is more on, I think, one of Jayashree's points was this whole emotional aspect of things. There is often at work, with everything you're dealing with, is such a sense of drama to everything. Okay, so there's so much you do. You give people instructions what to work, you tell people how to improve, you give feedback. One little tip that works for me and my team is try to take the drama out of it. Just be very matter of fact in terms of what you're doing, what your expectation is. Oh, we need to go from here to, we need to walk 2 kilometers today. It's not, oh my God, we need to walk 2 kilometers. If we don't manage, I don't know what's going to happen. So I realize, at least for me, there's a lot of drama happening all the time. So just take the drama out, be very matter of fact. And it's amazing how things simplify. And all of a sudden, it's not an ego issue, it's not a problem, it's just something you've got to get done. Everybody's working together. But take a break now and then. So I think these two things have helped me a lot. And if people can pick it up and find it useful, power to you guys.
Great. No, it's a wonderful session. I certainly had, every time I learn something new, I'm to say, and especially with gurus like Jayashree and Ashok, you learn always more. So there's always, I kind of rewind and go back and see where I need to work on. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. And self-care is definitely something which has to be now incorporated in our lives as a way of working. Organizations are definitely going to be more, thriving, as well as the whole environment changes if it is led from the front, from the leaders, in terms of creating, happier teams as well as, more productive teams. So with that, I'd like to conclude this session today. And at Samvedna, we are now offering employees, mental well-being services. We have an enterprise solution. We have a great, offering in terms of end-to-end mental well-being services for organizations. So if anybody of you is interested in knowing more about it, you can drop us a message. There's an email ID. You can, I will just type it in the chat window. So if you'd like to write to us, We also have a survey, which is going to get launched, but we need, we have a feedback form which we would like everybody to fill in. And I think as soon as you leave the meeting, you'll be able to see it. So we'd like you to please share your thoughts and also let us know what other topics you would like for us to cover. And because we are looking at doing these sessions at a more regular basis on every month. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do we have the survey link? So I'll just like to thank everybody once again. I know we have completely run out of time. So thank you, Ashok, and thank you, Jayashree. Yeah, you have it. So if you can just, or we'll just
Great, thanks everyone. Thanks, Jayashree. Thanks, Archana.
Thanks a lot, Ashok. Thanks a lot, Archana.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.